Leymah Gbowee was a Liberian teenager when she was swept into civil war. But in just 15 years, she built a network of prayer that saw the ousting of Liberia's dictator. Leymah called the experience Mighty Be Our Powers. Documentary makers called the movement that overthrew President Charles Taylor Pray the Devil Back to Hell. It all meant she would go on to share the 2011 Nobel Peace Prize with Liberia's new president, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, Africa's first female head of state. We went to New York City to meet Leymah and find out how it all happened. 3 months after you're given an audience with Charles Taylor, finally, peace talks begin. But they're not going fast enough for you women. And you took them hostage. Tell us what happened.
Every day we're constantly hearing 200 persons lost their lives, 300 persons, and this morning I had gotten to the place where I started to really question nonviolence activism. And then one morning I saw on an internet video the images of some children that had been killed as a result of a missile blast. I got angry, went back to the Peace Hall, told my mentor, Sugars, send for more women. They went and brought in more women. As the women came, the peace talks were about to start. I told them to sit at the door and loop arms. I did my hostage note, tap on the door, and send it in the room. And what we heard on the overhead speaker was, oh my God, General Leymah and her troops have seized the Peace Hall. In essence, my message was saying to every foreign national in the room, we'll allow you to come out, but every Liberian will stay in there. We're not going to allow food or water to enter the room. And for as long as it took them to give us peace, that's as long as it would be for them to get the comfort of life.
It caught their attention. You held them hostage. You nearly were arrested. And a peace accord is signed. How did you feel?
Well, it was a moment of joy, but it was also a moment of reflection, because we went back to Liberia celebrating. But even in our celebration, we had learned one thing. These people were tricksters. And signing documents, that was like Liberia's maybe 13th, 14th peace agreement that had been signed in 14 years. So what do we do? And as women, we just agreed that we will not go back home and celebrate. We will monitor the implementation of this document. We will set our own benchmarks to see how it unfolds.
And a democratic election was key to that. Tell us about the election of President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf.
Well, as we did our monitoring of the implementation of the peace agreement, it came time for elections. Most of the women were saying, usually it's not our thing. We don't get involved. It's the man's thing, like they did with war. And we kept saying to them, if you could build peace, you can build a nation.
By encouraging women to vote, Liberia elected Africa's first female head of state.
I tell people President Sirleaf is in a position where I do not envy, and it's not an enviable position, because Liberia had sunk to the depth.
Your life, in a way, to me, is like a microcosm of Liberia's ability or hope that it can rebound, because you've done it as a single mother of 6 children now. And it was actually in the stress of all of that, you write about your children confronting an alcoholism in you that had set in. How did you stop that?
I remember one day coming from work, I had really drank. And I think the night before, just a whole thing of gin and tonic. At that moment, I felt like I was going to die. And I kept praying, God, please, please, please help me, please, please. But then as I was crying, I looked up and my kids had surrounded the bed and they were just standing, looking at me. That is the worst image for any mother. Here I am with a bucket by my bed, throwing out, and these kids are just standing there. The expression on their faces, for me, read, if you go, who do we have? That was it. No one had to tell me, but I told God, please, if you get me out of this one, this is my last time. A wind, I mean real cool wind, went through that room, and along with that wind, the pain went instantly.
Never would Leymah have imagined that recovery would take her to the stage of the Nobel Peace Prize. She describes the journey in spiritual terms.
I think this is a calling, because when you're called, he equips you. No university life, no award, no interaction prepares me for where I find myself on a daily basis. It's only by that whispering of the Spirit of God that I think I'm able to do what I do.
Now, Lorna Dueck is here with me. Welcome, Lorna. Nice to have you back
Jim.
in the studio here. Before we talk about this, just real quick, Listen Up is now context.
Because the gospel fits in whatever context, even the sentencing of a Liberian dictator because of women's mighty prayers.
Yeah, your program's doing very well. You're now based in the CBC building downtown Toronto. You now commute every day?
It's working out just fine. It's a new place to share some of the light that you guys have raised and trained up here. It's great to be right down in the heart of Toronto.
Now, this story has real interest to you for a number of reasons, not the least of it being that about 12 years ago, you did something here on 100 Huntley Street that had a real impact.
You know, I was watching one of these interviews, and one of the guests David had on at that time was Joanne Lyons, and she was mentioning something about Sierra Leone at that time. And I was just sitting watching thinking, you know what, there's more we need to look into there. And the long story of that is that Joanne Lyons invited me to come to Sierra Leone with her to see what they were doing to heal children and families after the rebels of Charles Taylor's Diamond Wars had run amok through Sierra Leone. And I got to travel on behalf of Huntley Street and Listen Up to go down there, and we brought back this incredible story, which basically can be summarized up in this shot I had with little girls on my lap, all of them who had lost a limb to Charles Taylor's rebels, and concluded diamonds are not a girl's best friend. And what happened was many Huntley viewers were deeply touched by that. They sent in funds. We had over half a dozen diamond rings mailed in from viewers of women who said, I don't want this diamond anymore. I want you to sell this and send it to the children of Sierra Leone. Well, those prayers that all got started just continued to work across the globe in the mystery of God. And Leymah's story today is what was happening amongst the Liberian women who were under the dictatorship of Charles Taylor. They were connected to their sisters in Sierra Leone, neighboring Sierra Leone. And while we were praying here, they were praying there. They created this incredible prayer chain. They sat for 6 weeks in the fish market, refused to leave, fasting, praying. At one point, they even asked for a sex strike, saying nobody's going to give sex to their husbands until the warlords are confronted, because men knew men, and they were trying to get this story told everywhere that they were demanding for peace. And here we are last week. Charles Taylor is sentenced, guilty of all charges. And I don't think it would have happened without women all over the globe praying. And Leymah's story of receiving the Nobel Peace Prize because of the prayer activism that resulted in peace activism is proof.
Yeah, and you can be sure that there were thousands of women praying as a result of your call on this program. Taylor's conviction last week in this international court of war crimes has got to send a bit of a warning to all despots everywhere, not just in Africa, but other parts of the world, right?
And it's the first time that this has happened to an African dictator, so it is groundbreaking. It is extremely important. He is in jail now in the Netherlands, and some critics are saying we should be doing this in Africa, he should be imprisoned and tried in Africa, but they weren't ready for it and for all of the complications that it holds for the justice system. But this was groundbreaking. And it's a phenomenal example of the long road to justice.
Yeah.
It's not only activism, it's not only telling the story, it's, as these women showed, in there, day in, day out, insisting, organizing, pushing, always having a voice.
Oh. And now Liberia has a female president.
Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, and joined by the Malawian is the next.
That's right. Joyce Banda in Malawi is the second, but you got these two women now who are heading up these significant African countries.
And on a fraction of the resources that governments in North America work with. Yeah. So, you know, the test is out. You know, will they be able to put their children in school? Probably one of the most important things. Will they be able to set aside resources for clean water? Will they be able to rule with integrity? And they are getting great supports. One reason why we know about Leymah's story is that Abigail Disney went to go financially support Ellen Johnson Sirleaf in her new government
Walt
in Liberia.
Disney's daughter?
Granddaughter. Okay, so this is, and this, she went to Liberia to see how can I help financially, and realized there's a great story of women praying here, women in peace activism that will not be told unless we make a documentary. And so her first ever documentary, Pray the Devil Back to Hell, it gets nominated for a Oscar. It's an incredible, I've never seen as many different shots that were all collected from across different Liberian sources as is in Pray the Devil Back to Hell.
Now, has this been released yet?
Yes, it has, yeah. Pray the Devil Back to Hell was on PBS this fall. You can get copies through me. I just think it's a beautiful documentary that we all should be learning from.
And then she's written a book called Mighty Be Our Powers?
Leymah Gbowee's biography is Mighty Be Our Powers. She's 40. She's 40 years old, won the Nobel Peace Prize, gained a master's degree, but when she was 26, Jim, she described herself as a, quote, African baby machine, without a husband, despairing. And what turned the tide were two things. Her 3-year-old said, Mama, get on your knees. I want to pray for you. And she thought he was just playing church, but he prayed for her, and something shifted in her spirit. And then a second thing, she came home from one of her despairing moments, and her mother said, from giving birth, she was so poor she could not, nobody came to the hospital to help her. She laid on the hospital floor for a week because she couldn't afford a bed. You know these stories. Yeah. And when she managed to get out of hospital with another newborn, her mother said, I will tie my waist for you, which in Liberian terms means, I'm going to be there for you, girl. I'm going to be there for you. And so she helped raise her daughter's children. She helped get her daughter a volunteer job as a social worker at the local Lutheran church where Mom was attending. And it just grew from there.
Wow. It's a fascinating story, and it's so timely. Lorna, as always, you're right on the cutting edge, doing a great job.
Well, it was one of those stories where I said, the Huntley viewers have got to know. 12 years ago, they were praying for Sierra Leone. When Charles Taylor gets convicted, it's just somewhere in the thread of God's mercy. He's just reminding us, keep praying and working for justice.
And be faithful and patient. Sometimes it takes time.
Amen.
Terrific. We'll be back with more right after this, friends.